What's it like being an ecological dynamics coach in a traditional tennis world? Welcome, as always, to the My Tennis Coaching Podcast. And in today's podcast, I'm going to discuss my personal challenges with using a ecological dynamics approach to tennis coaching in a very traditional tennis coach world. I hope you're all well. And just before we get into today's topic, I am considering making the podcast a live show each and every Monday. Couple of reasons for it. Number one, Monday is my content day. It's when I sort of film my YouTube videos, film most of my real content for Instagram. And I normally film this podcast on a Monday, either sitting at home or sitting in my car. The views, so Monday works out quite well. The views generally on these videos are my lowest. I think part of it is one, they're not edited. So they don't have the color correction and they don't have the editing or the sounds. They're quite long as well. So I'm just talking to a camera. So why not talk to a camera and people can join in live and they can maybe ask questions on YouTube or Instagram. So that's the plan. I'm going to go live on the 14th of Feb, which is the 1 year anniversary of my Tennis Coach Academy website. It is also the 25th anniversary of when I qualified to be a tennis coach as well. So it's quite an important date, and it's Valentine's Day, but we know love means nothing for tennis coaches. So that's the plan. So I'm probably going to start going live after half term here in the UK. So half term is the week of the 17th. I'm away that week, but the week after, the plan is to go live each and every Monday. I can put out a topic in advance and share it with my social media, my email network and stuff as well. So people might join in live. Let me know in the comments if you think it's a good idea or not. But I'm going to give it a go because I quite like when I've done lives before and I've had sort of questions as I'm talking. It just makes it a bit more engaging and also helps keep me on track. Anyway, so in today's video, we're going to discuss the challenges of being an ecological tennis coach. One of the biggest barriers or challenges most coaches tell me is, Steve, I really love your stuff. I love your content. It makes a lot of sense. However, when I've gone back to my club and I've tried it, or I've shown my head coach, or parents have seen me do an ecological dynamics type of session, the peer pressure is just horrendous. My head coach tells me it's rubbish. I need to do lots of basket drilling and lots of repetition. The parents don't think I'm coaching. How are you so comfortable in your delivery? And have you ever experienced anything like that before? I've done episodes on this before where I've talked about peer pressure and I've talked about challenges from parents, challenges from head coaches. And I understand that a lot of new listeners or subscribers may not have heard these stories before. And even at the time of recording, I still get a lot of peer pressure. And that's from parents, from players, from national organisations, governing bodies. It's tough because ecological dynamics, even though it's been around since the 70s, within tennis coaching, it's still very rare. It's getting louder with more federations and national governing bodies starting to talk about constraint-based coaching and constraint-led coaching. Not so much ecological psychology, but they're starting to look at constraints. Whether or not they're misrepresented, that's a different story. But it is becoming a bit of a buzzword within coaching, so more coaches are using it. Again, the Grand Slam Coaches Conference of the week, there was quite a lot of reference to constraint-led coaching. I'm not too sure if it was correct referencing, but so it is being talked about a little bit more, and more coaches are starting to use constraints. But I think the first thing you need to understand is all coaching is constraints. A basket feed is a constraint. Verbal communication puts a constraint on the player. Mini tennis, tennis 10s, LTA youth, they're all constraints. So constraint-led coaching isn't new, and all coaching is some form of constraint. Ecological psychology and ecological dynamics is fairly new within tennis. And it's tough because it almost goes completely against the information processing or cognitive psychology that a lot of coach education is based on. So a lot of tennis coaches are educated to tell the players what to do, how to do it, when to do it. We have models, we have frameworks. Everything is in very linear fashion. Just look at your tennis program, red, orange, green, very linear. Your coach education, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, very linear. Beginners, improvers, intermediate, professionals, very linear. So within education, everything is linear because it's easy and it's easy to follow. So when you have a new methodology and a new approach, like ecological dynamics, it does upset the status quo. And when I started this journey for almost 5 years ago now, I had a lot of pushback, a lot of criticism. And I remember I just joined Batchwood, my centre where I work now, and I would work in a very ecological way. Wasn't fully down the rabbit hole, still technical to a degree. I was just still finding my way of applying the theory into a practical element on court. I also find it difficult to let go of my traditional way because I've coached that way for 20 years, was highly successful that way as well. But when I started teaching a bit more implicitly, the head coach at the time, who I won't name, hated it and wouldn't say anything to me direct because, again, I'm quite lucky, and this is not an ego talking, but I'm quite lucky because I'm a coach educator. I do have some degree of authority, I guess, in the space. So the head coach would never directly challenge me on my views or thoughts. It would be done very indirectly. So for a perfect example, I remember one coaches meeting, we're all sitting there and we're talking about the lessons, and the head coach says to the rest of the group, well, we need to spend less time playing and more time coaching. We need to spend less time doing silly two-touch tennis and get them hitting more balls and more repetition. Now, at the time, I was the only coach in the group who did two-touch tennis. No one else did it. Everyone else was quite traditional. So it was directly aimed at me. And fine, didn't listen to him because, again, I'm like, okay, that's your opinion. The great thing about being a self-employed coach is I can deliver the sessions how I see fit. Like, I will deliver it in the best way. And it wasn't arrogance on my part to a degree. Maybe it was, but I didn't think it was arrogance. I was just comfortable in, you know what? No, I'm actually going to try this out because I've tried the traditional approach for many years. Yes, I was successful, but only a small percentage of my players was successful. Out of the thousands of players I coached, only a couple really played at a high level. Most players failed. And a lot of players who I've coached have left the game. That's the stark reality of it. So I'm not just going to be swayed by an off-the-cuff comment. And because I then started to explore it more, and my lessons became more chaotic and less traditional and a bit more crazy. I remember once walking through the cafeteria a bit at the centre. I went to the toilet and came back out. And again, the head coach was speaking to, at the time, our lead performance coach. And I overheard, coaching's dead. The art of coaching's dying. Too much messing around and playing. And it was interesting because the head of performance spoke to me a few days later and asked me my opinions about implicit versus explicit learning. So it's obviously talking about me. And that's quite tough because you know people are talking about you and they're not talking positively about you either. They're talking quite negatively, like you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to coach was basically the crux of the conversation. And then to be asked about it a few days later made it quite obvious. But again, I stuck to my guns. Said, well, I believe implicit learning is more impactful. The research and evidence that I've looked at and seen, it shows more transfers into matches. More than happy if other coaches don't think that way, but this is the route I'm going, whether people like it or not. And that hasn't really gone away, even though the head performance coach has left the centre and the tennis manager at the time has left the centre. Other tennis managers have come in their place, and again, the comments that I normally get, oh, you just play games. And again, I remember one coach saying to me, oh, you would have loved my session on Friday. We just played games. You would have loved it. And I'm like, I don't just play games. Like, everything I do may look like a game to the kids, but there's a very clear and very specific intention behind what I'm doing. I've got a very clear intention of what movement solution or what I'm trying to guide the player towards. I don't just play a game. And again, that's just when you look at it from the outside perspective of a coach or a parent, even the player, it does look like I'm just playing games because I'm not shouting, I'm not demonstrating, I'm not doing interventions every 2 minutes. I'm not really explicitly coaching as we would see it in a traditional sense. So tennis managers and head coaches who have had over the past few years, they've all made these comments of, you need to intervene more. Can we get you intervening a little bit more? And I'm like, no. And like, why? Because I don't think it does any value. Is that what true coaching really is? I don't believe that coaches should be interfering every couple of minutes. And again, I remember one lead coach getting quite angry, and I'm sure he may be listening to this video now, but he got quite angry and told me, well, maybe I should run the program again. Because again, my perspective of what good coaching is didn't align with his. And there's no right or wrong really to coaching. But I'm very comfortable in my method and my methodology. Why? Because I've coached the other way. I've coached in a very traditional way, been semi-successful. But I know the negatives of coaching that way. I've also coached this different way. This maybe contemporary way or modern way, if you want to call it that. I've seen more players be successful. I also see a difference in me. So when coaches challenge me, I don't have an issue with other coaches coaching a different way. The only issue I have, and when I will get quite stubborn and put my feet in the ground and dig my heels in, is when coaches try and convert me back. Oh, can you do more demos? Can you do some more basket feeding? Can you coach more technically? I've had that from parents as well, and the answer's always no. And even if I'm an assistant coach on a session and the lead coach wants me to basket feed, I will basket feed. I'm not going to say, oh no, I'm not going to basket feed. But I'm probably going to do it in a way that's probably more impactful. I'm going to try and find a way of doing some decision making and problem solving and some variability. I'm not going to coach in a very traditional way, but I'm not going to turn around and say I'm not doing it, because I don't think that's fair. And again, one thing that maybe I got wrong when I started doing these videos and stuff was I made it very clear that I believe my way was the best way, and I still believe it's the most efficient and effective way. However, I do respect that other coaches might not see it that way, and that's fine. And when coaches challenge me or parents challenge me, I just say the same thing. This is how I coach. You either like it or you don't. I'm comfortable in the evidence and research. I've probably got more evidence and research to show that the way I'm coaching has a bigger impact on the player's development than the traditional way. A traditional coach won't have a lot of evidence. They'll have a lot of, well, what they suspect is evidence of, well, I've watched X player do it and it works for them. They'll have a lot of survivorship and confirmation bias. But actual physical evidence and research, there's not a lot out there. And that's the only time I get a little bit annoyed, is when people try and convert me back. I've had it with parents. Parents ask me, and again, I've done podcasts on it last year. I lost a couple of players last year because the parents wanted me to teach the player technically more. Why? Because other coaches have told me that's what they need. And I'm like, well, that's not how I work. And I don't believe that I should be teaching them this model of a technique, because the evidence and research shows that there's no such thing as technique. It's just something generally made up by tennis coaches. There's movement solutions that are individual to each player, which we are exploring with your child. But there's no such thing as a forehand. And I'm quite happy to let players go and say to parents, well, go somewhere else then. Fine by me. No harm, no foul. I'm not that interested. And it's tough when you get challenged. And I think if I was 20 years younger, I wish I was 20 years younger. Definitely wish I felt 20 years younger. I would find it tough working in some environments. Like if I think back to when I used to work at Wirral or Wrexham, and I tried this way with very explicit old school head coaches at the time, it would have been tough. It would have been tough to find the confidence to try it out and have the confidence and belief to stick to my guns. now I'm older, wiser, and I get it. I do come from a position of slight authority because I'm a coach educator, that I am comfortable just coaching this way. I am comfortable believing in my methodology, and I think that's the key to it. And it's hard to be challenged. It's hard to hear people tell you that you're a rubbish coach. It's hard to hear parents leave because they think the other coach is better, and you watch the other coaches' sessions and it's the most paint by numbers, explicit, technical lesson in the world, and the player is just absolutely bored. But I don't think it... I'm lucky maybe at the moment because I have a head coach who I work under who respects the way I coach. I think respects my opinion and respects what I do in my space. I think that makes it a bit easier now, especially over the past 4 years. It has been challenging with head coaches. There's been a few times where I've been close to leaving my current centre because it's like banging my head against a brick wall when I'm constantly running into roadblocks. And again, the previous head coach telling other people that I couldn't coach. I also see there's a bit of fear there as well, because again, if I'm on social media or YouTube or Spotify and I'm saying basket feeding is a waste of time, technical coaching is a waste of time, demonstrations are a waste of time, and these coaches are doing that stuff in lessons and parents and players are watching my content, then I do see there's a bit of fear there as well of, well, you're talking, and I've had this before, oh, you did a video about me. First and foremost, I've never done a video really about people that I work with because I don't think it's very professional. I may talk generally about stuff that I see in and around, but I would never directly talk about a coach, apart from one video I did, which was more about some terrible coaching that I seen at a club once. And I get that part of it as well. And a lot of coaches who use ecological dynamics and ecological psychology, they don't put a lot of stuff out there. And when I speak to these coaches, again, they have a fear of being made fun of or losing reputation, even though they're coaching this way. I don't care. And again, that's maybe the arrogance in me talking. I don't care because I think if people don't offer different opinions, then that's why we are in the position we're in. We just keep coaching the same way. And the numbers speak for themselves. Less players are competing in tennis. We are seeing more players potentially play tennis and coaching sessions, but less players are playing tennis. Why? Because again, the skill that they're being taught within their lessons does not transfer into the match court. And I think that just shows in the numbers. And I think people do need to look at different ways. And the tennis world still, I think there's a reluctance there because there's a path dependency of we've always done it this way. We've been successful. Look at the great champions: Sampras, Federer, Borg, McEnroe, Sellers, Venus, Serena, classic example of a trolley full of balls and just basket feed. Agassi's classic story of the ball machine. These great champions have been developed this way. Why should we change? Okay. Again, that's the path dependency, the survivorship and confirmation bias. And I understand why tennis doesn't want to move on. But if we have lots of modern evidence and research to show that kids don't learn in those traditional methods, kids don't learn via drills, kids don't learn by explicit instructions, that's what modern evidence and science shows us in terms of how we learn and how we learn to move. I understand why other coaches don't want to let that go as well. So they've been the challenges over the past 4 years. People making fun of me, people thinking that I'm nuts and I don't know how to coach and I don't know how to coach technique, even though, again, last year a clip got put onto a WhatsApp group and coaches put in biomechanical analysis, and I put mine in. I was made fun of, even though mine was pretty accurate in terms of what was going on. So I do have like an in-depth biomechanical knowledge because that's part of my job. I need to know how the body can move in the most efficient and effective manner. I do know that a 10-year-old can't serve like a pro player, and a lot of coaches will try and get a 10-year-old to serve like a pro player. I understand the limitations, but because I don't explicitly do that in sessions, I'm classed as a non-technical coach. And I get that as well. And the thing is, I don't let my ego take over. And I may sound egotistic in this video, but I'm not just going to go on court and just tell players what I know. And that's what a lot of coaches do. Coaches just go on there, just coach what they know. I coach what I see. I try and coach the player with what they have in the moment. I don't just spout loads of random biomechanical words or turn your shoulders, let the hand go quicker through the ball. Nonsense. Because it is just nonsense. Because I'll teach what I see. I'll coach what I see. And I think that's just me being comfortable being me. It's not about me when I coach. It's about my players. I'm not there to show how great I am and what a huge ego I have. And again, people think because I put stuff online, I've got this massive ego. It's not. I'm actually the most introvert, shy, and probably sometimes imposter syndrome, insecure coach you can find. But I put stuff out there because I think coaches should have a voice, and my tennis coaching all started off my journey and me getting my voice out there. And I'll probably just finish off with my biggest challenge at the moment, and one that I am struggling with on a daily basis, especially now. And it's my own confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is you believe your way is the best way. And I've got that in abundance with ecological dynamics because of the amount of time, evidence, research, the amount of time I've spent on court, the impact I've seen it have on players. I do believe this is a very efficient and effective way. That's my confirmation bias. I struggle now, and my biggest challenge is when coaches present to me a very traditional, linear way of working, and they ask my opinion. And someone said it to me this week, like, your face says one thing, but your eyes are telling me something else. And it's really hard because I don't think I'd ever turn around and say coach is wrong. But it's hard for me to see the world through an ecological set of eyes and look at traditional practice. So when I see a coach work on the serve and they're working on a 90-degree elbow and they decompose the serve by getting the player to stand there with the elbow in line with the shoulder, which I've done a million times myself, by the way. And a coach says to me, oh, this works. It's hard for me to look at, well, does it really work? Because the evidence suggests that it won't work because you're decomposing the skill. When the player goes into a full action, that probably is not going to emerge and happen. And there's no returner down the far end, and there's no score, and there's no pressure. So the odds of the player replicating that very specific movement you're teaching are very low. It's very hard for me to look past all that. And when coaches say to me, this is great, or when coaches are getting players to run around cones and telling me that it helps develop footwork, or when coaches basket feed the ball and tell me it develops technique. Again, a very, very successful and famous coach is on one of my WhatsApp groups, and they were talking this week about basket feeding is essential. It's essential for technical development. And part of me wants to jump into the conversation and challenge. But then it's like, I don't want to spend my whole day, and I've been there, I don't want to spend my whole day trying to fight this narrative, because I think that just then comes across as argumentative. And now I sort of ask the question, why? Okay, well, why are you decomposing it? What's the methodology? What's the reason and why you're getting the elbow in the 90 position? What's the evidence or stuff behind it? And more often than not, coaches just come back with, well, it's always worked for me. So there's no actual science or data or research behind it. But that's what I struggle with at the moment, is just watching those things, because I still have to work on a daily basis. And again, the coaches I work with are great. Some of them have implemented some ecological dynamics, some haven't, and that's, again, fine. And I think one thing I'm always keen to stress is I don't want to come across of telling coaches how to coach. I'm just sharing my opinion of how I coach and what works for me. And if that helps other coaches out, then great. But I find it really tough now when coaches just, again, goes back to what I was saying before. They're trying to sell a traditional idea or methodology to me, and I just can't buy into it. It's really hard. And I've mentioned in a few podcasts before, I've gone to conferences, I've gone to workshops, and I've seen very traditional methods, and people look at me going, you see, this international expert's doing shadow swings. You see, you're wrong. And I'm like, just because this international expert's doing shadow swings don't mean that they're really efficient or effective. Again, I'm quite comfortable in the research and the evidence. I'm quite comfortable in my area of sort of ecological psychology and stuff. Like, I'm quite comfortable in that. And that's my hardest bit. I think it's hard to see once you go down the rabbit hole and you look at the evidence and the research. And again, I've mentioned evidence and research quite a lot today. I really suggest, if you are a coach working in this space, spend time looking at the evidence and research. Read Rob Gray's 3 books, which are amazing. That's a great starting point. Read Transforming Basketball by Alex Harama. Listen to the Talent Equation. Like, there's lots of practical coaching examples, but also actual studies to show that this stuff does work, and it is very efficient and effective compared to traditional models. So I've spent the past 4 or 5 years looking at all the evidence and research, and I've spent the past 4 or 5 years being on a tennis court and practically applying a lot of these theories as well. So I've got my own confirmation bias. I've got my own sort of view of the world, and that's hard. But I think they're the biggest challenges. It's swimming against the tide, especially in tennis, because tennis is so traditionally coached dominant. Like, everyone basket feeds, everyone does demonstrations, everyone teaches from a technical lens, and they believe in perfect technique and good technique and fundamentals. 90% of tennis coaching is based on that stuff. And then when you are, like me, an outsider, you're going against the status quo. It's challenging. But the most important thing is my players enjoy it. I enjoy it. And I've talked about this before. I am such a happy tennis coach now because my lessons are fun. My lessons are different. My lessons are unique and chaotic, and I don't know which direction my lessons are going to go. 5 years ago, my lessons were boring. They were repetitive. It was a very linear process, and I would deliver the same session over and over again because that's what I believe my players needed. They needed repetition with repetition. I was fed up. I was depressed. I was annoyed. I was frustrated. So were my players. So if you ask me, how do I know it works? I'm happy. My players are happy. I'm improving as a coach at a much quicker rate over the past 5 years than I did in the previous 20. My players, I believe, are improving at a quicker rate of my previous players. That's my evidence and research, backed up by a lot of science research as well. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please like and subscribe. Let me know if you think going live each week on a Monday is a good idea for the future of the podcast. I'm probably going to do it anyway, because like I said in this podcast quite a lot, I'd just like to do things on my own terms, and hopefully it'll be successful, and that might give you a chance to engage and stuff as well. As always, have a good day. Don't let the critics or the traditional tennis coaches put you off. If you want to try out this method, best way to do it, get on court and try it. Speak to you soon.